Get out of here! You do not belong here! Jessica's voice rang out, sharp as a razor cutting through the wedding march. 150 guests went silent. I was there, in the middle of the grand hall covered in white flowers, looking at my new daughter-in-law in her $8,000 silk dress, her face red with anger, her mouth still trembling with pride. My son Kyle was behind her, stunned as if he had been slapped by the wind. I said nothing. I just nodded slightly, adjusted my shirt collar, and turned around, leaving behind the murmurs of the bride's relatives. I left not out of shame, but because I understood. It was time to teach the lesson I had promised my wife all my life. The lesson of gratitude, the one my son had just lost on the happiest day of his life. My name is Frank Mason. I am 58 years old. I am an electrician, the owner of a small shop on the outskirts of Chicago. All my life I have only known how to work with my hands, with wires, with the smell of sweat and sparks. No degrees, no business cards. But I raised my son, built my house, and lived off my own effort. Kyle is all I have left after losing my wife, Helen, the woman who taught me that true love is not about talking much, but doing without stopping. I still remember the last night before Helen died. She took my hand and said weakly, "Honey, no matter how high our son gets in his studies, do not let him forget these hands," I promised her. A promise I thought I had kept until today. The wedding was held at the Riverside Country Club, a place where every floor tile probably cost more than my monthly salary. Jessica, Kyle's wife, chose that place for its class. From the beginning, I knew I did not belong in that world. People in Armani suits, gold watches, talking with nasal voices and half smiles. I arrived in my $300 suit, the same one I wore to my son's graduation 4 years ago. In the middle of that crowd, I was like an ink stain on a white tablecloth, but I did not care. I came to see my son happy, not to impress anyone. Before the wedding, I silently paid half the party expenses because Kyle told me, "Jessica wants everything to be perfect, Dad." I nodded. In my life, I had never known perfect. I only knew how to do enough. However, in her eyes, the money I worked so hard to earn seemed to be worth nothing. When Jessica screamed, "Get out of here," I felt no anger, only a cold emptiness in my chest. I looked at my son, the one who used to follow me around the shop, the one who begged me, "Dad, I want to be an electrician like you." Now he lowered his head without daring to look at me. I turned around, walked slowly between the illuminated tables, passing through looks of pity and contempt. With every step I heard Helen's voice in my head. When a child forgets gratitude, let him learn again with the price of forgetting. I squeezed the phone in my hand, without crying, without getting angry. I just knew that, after today, not only would a wedding be canceled, but a lesson would begin. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel Williams Revenge Stories, and tell us where you are listening from in the comments below. The next morning, before the sun peeked through the window, I was already awake. The old habit of an electrician. Waking up early, making a strong black coffee, and sitting down to listen to the ticking of the clock in the small house. I built this house with my own hands more than 30 years ago, brick by brick, wire by wire. Helen used to say, "The house does not need to be big, just enough to sleep in peace." Now, only I remained, with my creaking wooden chair and a cup of cold coffee. I opened my phone and looked at the photo someone had sent me last night. In the photo, Jessica was laughing among her college friends, her face lit by the lights, and me, in the distance. Only the back of my gray jacket was visible. Slightly hunched, I laughed softly. Maybe that was the moment she felt the most shame. When people saw the shadow of an electrician in the crowd of tuxedos. When Helen was alive, she always believed that the world was not divided by classes, but by how people looked at each other. But it seems I was wrong to think my son believed that too. I remember clearly the first time Kyle brought Jessica home. She looked around the shop, the rolls of wire, the copper pipes, the smell of machine oil. Then she smiled. How interesting. Do you work here? No, I told her. This is the place where I support my family. She fell silent. Her smile remained polite, but her eyes were already far away, and Kyle looked at me with worried eyes. Dad, Jessica is a little different from us, but she is a good person. I nodded. I did not want to put him in an uncomfortable situation. In that moment, I only saw my son in love, and I remembered Helen's look the day I proposed to her. Full of trust. I used to think that love could bridge any gap, even between a worker and an educated person. But last night, standing in that golden hall, I understood that there are distances not measured in money, but in false pride. Jessica's family was from the intellectual world. Her parents were professors, lawyers, and her friends were all colleagues from Chicago. They spoke with words I did not understand, and it seemed they did it just to emphasize that I did not understand. When I greeted them, they smiled politely, as if talking to a driver or a waiter. I tried not to give it importance, but every look, every smile, was like a small cut, slowly wounding what I have always preserved, the pride of the worker. Kyle was different. He tried to mediate. He offered me a glass of wine and whispered, "Dad, don't worry. The people here are just a little different." I looked at him and smiled sadly. "Don't worry, son. I am used to working under fluorescent lights, not chandeliers." But that night, when Jessica stood in the middle of the hall, with her face pale and her eyes cold as steel, I knew that a little different was an understatement. She was not only different, but she wanted nothing to do with the roots her husband came from. And in her eyes, I was not her father-in-law. I was a stain on her perfect wedding dress. I took a sip of cold coffee and murmured to myself, "Honey, our son's world is really big." But it seems he has forgotten the way home. That afternoon my head still hurt from the sleepless night, but the voices, the looks at the party kept echoing in my head like the hum of a leaking transformer. I do not remember who started the conversation first. I only remember the kind smile of Mrs. Miller, Jessica's mother, when she approached me while the guests moved to the main dinner. "Mr. Mason," she began with a voice as soft as wedding cake frosting, "can I steal a couple of minutes?" I got up with the intention of giving her my seat, but she gestured with her hand. "It is not necessary. I just want to say something in private. It is a bit noisy here." We went out to the hallway, where the walls were covered in oil paintings, and the light reflected in the crystal chandeliers. Mr. Miller, her husband, and their son Daniel, who worked at an investment bank, were already waiting. They all smiled at me excessively politely. I had already seen that kind of smile hundreds of times, the one people use to hide their contempt. "You must be tired," Mrs. Miller began. "There are a lot of people today. The atmosphere is a little different from usual gatherings." I smiled. "Don't worry, I am used to working among the noise of drills and the smell of welding. These bright lights are much more pleasant." She hesitated. Then she said, as if afraid of offending me, "We just thought that after dinner you could go rest early. The rest of the party will be quite professional. They are all friends from Jessica's university, lawyer partners, professors, and young people usually talk a lot about their professions, about laws, about politics. A bit boring for someone outside that world." I looked at them. 3 faces with the same smile. I understood their hint. "You do not belong here." I replied slowly, trying to keep a soft tone. "Well, thanks for the advice. But today is my son's wedding. I think I should stay until the bride and groom leave for their honeymoon." The smile on their faces froze like dry paint. Mrs. Miller nodded slightly, and Mr. Miller replied, "Of course, the decision is yours. We just wanted everything to go well." When they turned around, I saw Daniel's gaze go down to my old shoes, and then to my Seiko watch with the worn paint. That look said it all. I returned silently to my table, trying to smile at my old friend Mike, the painter I had invited. "Everything good, Frank?" asked Mike. I nodded, pouring myself a little more beer. "Everything good, just that. It seems there is no lack of electricity here, but it is cold to the bone." Mike's laughter died down when he realized I was not joking. I sat there, looking at the glasses of sparkling wine, the flowing silk dresses, and I understood. Tonight, I was not just a guest at a wedding, but a guest in another world. I remembered when Kyle was little. Every time a friend made fun of him for having clothes stained with oil, I told him, "It doesn't matter, son. Oil only sticks to the clothes of people who work." But tonight, that phrase could not save me from the feeling of being erased from my own son's memory. The party began. The music sounded soft as velvet. The glasses of red wine shone under the crystal lights. I was sitting at table 10, in a secluded corner near the window, next to Mike and Tony's couple, my former neighbors from Cicero Avenue. They dressed simply, lost in a sea of suits and ball gowns. I looked around. At the main table, Jessica was sitting between her parents, her face radiant as if it were her coronation. Kyle smiled beside her, somewhat forced. I could not blame him. I knew he was trying to be a bridge between two worlds, the world of workers like me and the world of power, titles and money that his wife adored. When the first course was served, Mrs. Miller raised her glass, for the happiness of the bride and groom and for a bright future. I also raised my glass, clinking it gently with Mike's. The wine tasted more bitter than usual. I heard at the next table the group of friends from Jessica's university talking about legal cases, contracts, and stocks. Occasionally they laughed, looked in my direction, whispered something, and laughed again quietly. The kind of laughter I had heard many times in bids, half mocking, half pitying. Halfway through dinner, a gray-haired man, Mr. Peterson, a longtime partner of the Miller family, approached. He shook my hand, his look somewhat inquisitive. "Are you Kyle's father?" "Yes." "Ah, the boy is very lucky. Jessica is a girl with a bright future." He said lucky with the tone people usually use to talk about someone who has just won the lottery. I just smiled, but inside I felt a slight crack, like a light bulb burning out. With the main course, the atmosphere in the hall became even stranger. Jessica leaned toward Mrs. Peterson and said, loud enough for me to hear, "Kyle is very lucky to have the support of his family. His father is a good person. He is just from another world." "Another world?" asked Mrs. Peterson, raising an eyebrow. "He is a manual worker, you know, but very dedicated. I always respect people like him." I heard every word, every syllable chosen with the precision of a scalpel. People like him. Not like us, but like them. I looked at my son. He heard, but pretended he didn't. Surely he hoped I hadn't heard. I took a sip of beer slowly. In that moment I remembered Helen. She used to say, "If people judge you for your work, let them burn in their own pride." But today that fire burned no one but me. When the music started playing, Kyle invited Jessica to dance. The two smiled radiantly under the lights. I stayed seated, watching my son spin with the woman he believed was the love of his life. But in her eyes I saw a different look, that of someone planning to erase a part of the past. And I understood that tonight was not just a wedding party. It was a farewell between a father and a son, between two worlds that only shared a last name. Halfway through the party, I got up and went out to the terrace to get some air. The yellow light filtered through the glass, reflecting my image, a man in a worn suit, slightly hunched back, the lost look in the middle of a gala night. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the jazz music came from behind like a strange wind. Just as I was about to take out a cigarette, I heard Jessica's voice from the door. She was talking to Mr. Peterson with the same sweet smile, but every word was sharp as a piece of glass. "Yes, sure, Kyle's father is a good person. He is independent, hard-working, but a little different from us. Not everyone is used to the circle of lawyers, you know." "Ah, I understand," replied Mr. Peterson with a somewhat sympathetic tone. "Anyway, manual labor is also valuable." Jessica laughed softly. "Yes, of course, as long as they don't forget their limits." I do not remember how long I stood there. I just felt the night wind freezing my chest. "Limits," she said. "The limit between those who have a degree and those who only have their hands. I looked at my hands, the thick calluses, the nails with a little metal dust. I used to be proud of them because they had supported my family for 30 years. But tonight, those hands became a symbol of inferiority. I returned to the table. Kyle was talking to his friends with a forced smile. I sat down, trying to find his gaze, but he looked away, pretending to be busy with his phone. I understood. He was afraid of feeling shame, afraid that his friends would know that his father was not a lawyer or a professor, but just a common electrician. Suddenly the music stopped. The master of ceremonies invited the bride and groom to give a speech. Jessica went up on stage and took the microphone. She spoke of love, of dreams, of the effort to overcome differences in life. Everyone applauded loudly, but I heard the double meaning behind every word. Differences in life. She was talking about me. When the lights pointed directly at the stage, I saw Kyle's eyes. He was not looking at me, but at the floor. For an instant, I realized I had lost the son I thought would carry the name Mason with pride. Mrs. Miller, sitting at a nearby table, turned to her husband and whispered, "I worry that Mr. Mason feels out of place." He shrugged. "Well, but he will get used to it. People like him don't usually stay late at parties." I drank my beer in one gulp. It burned my throat. People like him. That phrase stuck deeper than a knife. Suddenly I thought of Helen. She believed that people would see the true value of a person if they lived with decency. But Helen, it seems the world has changed. Now people do not care how you live, only what you wear, at which table you sit, and which of their languages you speak. I stood up, adjusting my tie. Only one thought in my head. If I stayed longer, I would do something I would regret. I went out to the terrace. I took a deep breath, and at that moment, Jessica's voice sounded behind me. "Mr. Mason, we need to talk." I turned around. Her look no longer had that false courtesy. She was ready for what was coming, and so was I, that night, right before the real storm began. She took me to the rooftop. The moonlight spilled over the artificial lake behind the restaurant. The water shone as if covered in silver. The music from inside could still be heard, mixed with happy laughter, as if no one noticed that a father was being erased from his own son's party. Jessica stood tall, her hands clasped in front of her chest. Her voice was as fluid as someone speaking before a court. "Mr. Mason, I think it is time for you to go rest. You already saw the ceremony, took photos, had dinner. The rest is just dancing and conversations between colleagues." I looked her straight in the eyes with a voice still calm. "And I just want to stay to see my son smile for a few more minutes. It is the only thing I came for." "I understand," she said, her smile fading, "but this is a very important event for us. Kyle is entering a different world, and I don't want anything to hinder that step." "Are you referring to me?" I asked slowly. Jessica was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. "Yes, you are his father, and I respect you. But we are different. I don't want my colleagues to think I come from a lower class." I laughed softly, quietly. "A lower class? I didn't know there was a law dictating that electricity must flow from the rich to the poor." She frowned. "Do not misunderstand my words. You can be proud of your work, but please understand, tonight is not about you. It is about us, people who are building a future, people with education, with a position." "With a position," I repeated, looking at the bright lights of the hall in the distance. "So according to you, is your husband's father a wrinkle in the perfect wedding photo?" Jessica bit her lip, trying to keep her voice down but without hiding her disdain. "Frank, I don't want things to get awkward. Just leave early. People will understand. They will say you were tired. It is the best way for everything to run smoothly." I stared at her for a long time. Behind the flawless makeup, I clearly saw a girl terrified that it would be discovered she did not belong to the world she was trying to enter. But instead of fighting with her character, she chose to trample on others to climb one more rung. I did not move. "I'm not tired, Jessica. I'm here because I paid for this party with almost a year of work. And if you are ashamed of that, then you should be ashamed of yourself." Her face turned red. Her eyes flashed with anger. "Do you really not understand what I am telling you?" "Of course I do." "You're telling me to get out." She gritted her teeth. "Yes. If you want to hear it directly, get out of here. You're embarrassing me in front of everyone." Her voice echoed through the glass doors, and in that instant, the music in the hall seemed to stop too. I turned around and saw Kyle standing a few steps away, his face without a drop of blood. "Jessica," he stammered, "what are you saying?" "I'm saying the truth," she shouted. "I don't want your father to ruin our night." The world around me went into absolute silence. I heard no music, no voices, only Helen's voice, as if coming from somewhere, soft and sad. When someone forgets gratitude, do not get angry. Let them learn for the price of their forgetting. I exhaled slowly. In my mind, a decision had just been lit. No one in the hall was dancing anymore. The music stopped in the middle of a song, as if the power had been cut. Hundreds of people looked toward the terrace where I was. Jessica was still breathing heavily, her face pale with anger, while Kyle remained motionless as a statue. I did not say a word. I just put my hand in my pocket, adjusted my tie, and took out my phone. "What are you doing?" asked Jessica with a trembling voice. "Calling a friend," I replied. "Someone who will understand perfectly the limit you just mentioned." I dialed the number of Richard Steinberg, the manager of my accounts at First National Bank, a person whose name alone indicated that the call was important. When Richard answered, I put it on speaker, my voice as calm as if I were reading a contract. "Richard, I want to activate the special clause on 2 student loans, the accounts of Kyle Mason and Jessica Miller." The whole terrace went silent. Jessica frowned. "What loans?" I didn't look at her. I just spoke to the phone. "I want to request the full repayment of principal and interest with immediate effect." Richard hesitated. "Frank, are you sure? It's over $425,000 in total, you know that." I nodded. "I am sure. I have just been informed that they no longer need my participation in their lives. I am just respecting their wish." Jessica took a step back. "You're lying. I never asked you for borrowed money." I turned to her, the light reflecting in my eyes like fire. "No? Then who do you think paid for your 3 years of law at Northwestern at $82,000 a year? Who paid for the bar exam prep course, the laptop, the apartment near the university, and the car you drive?" Her lips trembled. I thought my parents—" "Your parents paid $15,000 a year. The rest, $47,000 a year. It was me." Kyle approached with a broken voice. "Dad, is it true that you also paid for me?" I nodded. $3,400 every month. For 3 years, without missing a single payment. I held up the phone to show them the transfer history. Every line was clear. September 15th, 2021. Transfer $7,600 USD. October 15th, 2021. Transfer $7,600 USD. November 15th, 2021. Transfer $7,600 USD. Jessica stammered. "It can't be." "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know," I interrupted her. "Because you never asked. People don't ask where the money comes from when they think they deserve it." No one breathed. The guests inside were now crowding with phones in hand, flashes blinking. I heard some whispers. "Is it the father-in-law? Do they owe him money?" I hung up. I put the phone in my pocket and said quietly, "Starting now, you and your husband have 30 days to pay. If you consider me a stain, then clean it with your own money." Jessica stepped back completely. Tears began to fall, while Kyle stared at me with a mixture of confusion and shame. I turned around without saying another word. I walked through the crowd that parted to let me pass, hearing only fragmented whispers. A woman said quietly, "That father—" She didn't need to shout. She just had to tell the truth. I went down the stairs. The cold wind hit my face, but inside I felt a strange warmth. Maybe because I had just flipped the switch on the first lesson my son would have to learn for himself, the lesson on the price of ingratitude. I still remember the light in the hall when the glass door opened after Jessica's scream. The guests stood still. The music stopped in the middle of a song. Only the soft clinking of glasses could be heard. I turned to look. A sea of curious, compassionate, fearful eyes. But strangely, no one was laughing anymore. Jessica was trembling, her lips pale, her gaze searching the room as if looking for a way out. She tried to shout again as if to save her pride. "You can't do that." "It is your son's wedding," I replied, my voice so deep and soft that only those closest could hear me. "And it is also the money I paid so my son could be at this wedding." I did not shout. I just told the truth, but in the air it resonated like thunder. Kyle approached, face pale. "Dad, is it true you paid everything for both of us?" I nodded. "Not to get gratitude, but so both of you had the chance to fly far. But if those wings are used to despise the ground, then maybe I wired the circuit wrong." That sentence silenced the whole hall. A guest whispered, "He's right. Who could kick out a father like that?" Mrs. Miller approached, trying to stay calm. "Frank, please, let's not make a scene. We can talk in private to avoid misunderstandings." I turned to her. My voice was not louder but sharp as an electric spark. "There is no misunderstanding. You said it well. This is a matter of image, right? I'm just helping you show your true image." Then I turned to Jessica. "You said I am ignorant. It is true. I don't have a law degree. I don't have a doctorate. But I know what a contract is. And I understand the clause you just broke. The respect clause." Jessica broke down crying, her face stained with mascara. She stammered, "You're embarrassing your son." I looked at Kyle, his eyes full of confusion. "No, Jessica. You embarrassed him. I just turned on the light so he could see." I took out my phone, opened the bank app, and showed it to Mr. Peterson, the guest who was closest, the one who had smiled politely at me during dinner. "Could you confirm for me what this line says?" He looked and nodded. "Monthly transfer, private educational loan, Kyle Mason and Jessica Miller. 37 times, without missing a single month." A murmur spread through the hall like an electric current through a metal net. Jessica collapsed into a chair, covering her face with her hands. Mrs. Miller stepped back, face pale. Kyle stood paralyzed, moving his lips without being able to say a word. I slowly walked out of the hall, leaving behind a mixture of looks, compassion, fear, and a little admiration. Walking to the parking lot, I heard someone say quietly behind me, "There are lightning bolts that kill no one, but burn all falsehood." I did not turn around. I just got in the car, started the engine, and saw the wedding lights fade in the rearview mirror. My son was still there, lost among the lights of others, and I, for the first time in many years, felt that the darkness ahead of me was lighter than the lights I left behind. I drove slowly along the road by the lake. The streetlights reflected in the water, yellow spots blurring on the windshield. I didn't turn on the radio, nor did I think about the laughter or applause of the wedding. There was only one sound I could hear, that of my own silence. They say silence is gold, but that night it weighed like lead. Every time I remembered Kyle's face, I felt a pang in my heart. The boy said nothing when Jessica insulted me. He didn't defend me. He didn't stop her. He just stood there, like a lost child in a crowd he no longer recognized. I asked myself, "Helen, if you were alive, what would you do?" Arriving home, I turned off the engine but stayed in the car. The small house was dark. Only the light of the porch illuminated our faded wedding photo. I went in and turned on the kitchen light. The smell of old paint, the familiar scent of machine oil, mixed with a nameless emptiness. I put the keys on the table and opened my laptop. On the screen was the list of payments I had carefully saved over the last 3 years. Every line was a month of my life. $3,400 for Kyle, $4,200 for Jessica. I had noted every detail, so he could fly higher. Now, looking at it, every number felt like a cut on the palm of my hand. I reviewed the wedding expenses section. $7,500 for the venue, $5,000 for the banquet, $4,000 for the photographer. I remember when signing the contract, the manager asked, "Do you want your name to appear on the invoice?" I shook my head. "It is not necessary. Just put family of the groom." And now the family of the groom was expelled from their own party. I opened a drawer and took out the bottle of bourbon Helen had bought before dying. She told me, "Save it. Drink it when our son graduates from college." I did exactly that, only I didn't expect that after college, my son would also graduate in the lesson of ingratitude. I poured myself a small glass, sipping it. My throat burned, but my heart remained cold. In my head, Helen's voice echoed again. "If one day our son forgets gratitude, do not hit him or yell at him. Let life teach him in my place." I looked around the house. Everything was so quiet, I could hear the ticking of the clock. On the corner of the table, there was still the scratch Kyle made when he was a boy, practicing how to connect a circuit. At the time, I thought about fixing it, but then decided to leave it, like a trace of his childhood. Now, looking at it, it looked like an old wound, dry but painful at the slightest touch. I wrote a few lines in an old notebook with a worn leather cover. September 15th, 2024. Today I lost my son, but perhaps I just saved the man he will become. I closed the notebook and sighed. There were no tears, no rage, only an overwhelming tiredness, as if all the electricity in my body had been turned off. And in that darkness, I knew. The lesson was just beginning. The next morning, sunlight sneaked through the curtains, but the house remained cold. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same place where for more than 10 years Kyle and I had breakfast every day before he went to school. On the wall still hung his college graduation photo, blue gown, radiant smile, and me behind with my hand on his shoulder. Now, looking at it, I saw in my eyes back then a lifetime of trust. I stared so long that the coffee got cold. Outside, cars passed noisily, but inside the house, everything remained in a deathly silence. I opened the laptop again, this time not to see the bills, but to face the truth. I had exchanged so many years of my life for what others call social status. Maybe I was wrong to believe that if I tried my hardest, my son would not forget his roots. In the folder, Kyle's future, I had saved everything, from the tuition contract, the rent bills, to the receipts for textbooks. I was so careful not to claim it, but to remind myself, I am useful. I am still helping my son move forward. But now every number on the screen felt like a stab. I opened another file. Helen JPG, a photo of my wife taken in the shop the day Kyle was accepted into college. She was wearing a blue jacket stained with paint, a cup of coffee in her hand, and a kind smile. I remember perfectly what she said that day. "Honey, we did it. Our son will have a different life." I also smiled, without imagining that that different life would be a place where he would treat us like strangers. Suddenly the phone vibrated. The screen showed Kyle's name. I hesitated a few seconds and then answered. His voice was hoarse and trembling. "Dad, I'm sorry, Jessica." "She is in a panic. The press won't stop calling. Someone recorded a video last night and uploaded it to the internet. The whole party saw everything." I said nothing, just listened to his ragged breathing. "She is afraid of losing her job, Dad. Afraid that they will cancel her contract at the law firm. She is crying. Her mom is trying to comfort her." I closed my eyes, my voice calm. "Kyle, I just ask you one thing. When your wife said I was ignorant, that I didn't deserve to be at her party, where were you?" There was silence on the other end of the line. I heard him take a deep breath and then whisper, I just wanted to avoid a bigger problem." "Does that mean you chose to stay silent?" "I didn't know what to do." "You didn't know, or were you ashamed of me?" That question made the air become dense. After a long while, he said quietly, "Dad, I was wrong. I didn't know she would say those things," I replied. "The mistake wasn't that you didn't stop her, but that you forgot who brought you to where you are today." I heard his muffled sobs. But instead of anger, I only felt tiredness. Kyle, don't apologize. Let life teach you, as your mother asked me. Those bills are now the lesson, and every lesson has a price. I hung up, put the phone on the table, and looked toward the backyard. In that place, years ago, Helen and I taught Kyle to fly a kite. Now, only the wind blew through the old string, whispering like a reminder. What flies too high and forgets its roots, sooner or later, snaps the string. That noon, while reviewing some electrical repair contracts in the shop, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages, calls, social media notifications arrived in an avalanche, as if someone had flipped a switch for the whole world to see my family's business. On the screen was a short video, Jessica screaming, "Get out of here!" in the middle of the wedding, followed by the scene of my call, my calm voice talking about $425,000 and an immediate payment clause. Hundreds of comments, shared thousands of times. Someone gave it a headline, "Bride kicks father-in-law out of party, not knowing he paid for her law degree." I didn't know whether to laugh or sigh. My son called a few minutes later. His voice was chaos. "Dad, I didn't know this would get so big. The newspapers, the radio, everyone is talking about this." Jessica's in a panic, hiding in her room. "Maybe she should stay there and think," I replied with a deep voice. He begged me. "Dad, I beg you not to say anything else to the media. They are asking if you really lent them the money, if you have papers." I laughed softly. "Son, I am an electrician. I always work with papers. Without papers, no current is safe." In the afternoon, the Chicago Tribune published an article, "The Wedding That Became a Lesson on Class and Gratitude." They wrote neutrally, but the comments were not. "That father is a man of the century. If I were him, I would have done even more. The world needs more fathers like him." Meanwhile, Jessica's social networks exploded. She posted a status. "I am being defamed. What he calls help is actually financial manipulation." Below, people argued heatedly. But then, one by one, the witnesses of the party began to speak. Judge Martinez, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Anderson, those who were sitting near the terrace, all confirmed. He just stood there, telling the truth, without insulting anyone. The bride, on the other hand, was screaming, calling him ignorant. By night, the law firm where Jessica was about to start working announced that it was temporarily suspending her contract until her ethics were verified. Kyle called again, his voice lifeless. "Dad, they have suspended her. She has lost everything. Do you hear me?" I was silent for a moment. "No, Kyle. She hasn't lost everything. She has just lost the mask." I looked out of the shop. The sunset light illuminated the rolls of copper neatly stacked. My world was simple. If a wire broke, it was reconnected. But people's hearts were not that easy. "Dad, what do I do now?" he asked with a weak voice. "Learn to take responsibility. Both of you." "And me? I won't say another word. The light is now yours. See where it shines." I hung up. I sat at my desk. Outside the shop, the sunset fell like a current, fading into the darkness. But somewhere, I knew. The lesson I had started last night was still running, constant, like an underground circuit, impossible to cut. The next morning I woke up later than usual, not from fatigue, but because the house was suddenly too quiet, the silence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. I poured myself coffee, turned on the TV, and, as expected, our story was on all the news. On the local channel, an anchor was reading, "The video of the bride who kicked out her father-in-law, who paid for both of their studies, has gone viral with more than 2 million views." Then they repeated the scene where I turned around and left the party. I saw my image on the screen, the slightly hunched back, the slow steps, but the calm look, without resentment, without boasting. Someone commented in the small box on the screen, "That is not revenge, it is dignity." The phone rang again. It was Richard Steinberg, my bank manager. "Frank, I just want you to know that now my whole office is talking about you. And one more thing. What you did is completely legal. They have no way to sue you. I started laughing. Richard, I didn't do it to win a lawsuit. I just wanted them to understand the value of $1 the moment they spend it without knowing who sweated for it. Anyway, replied Richard, you have taught the whole city a lesson. I hung up and looked toward the backyard. Kyle's old oak tree was still there, where I once hung a tire swing for him. So many years have passed, and the rope is still strong, despite the rain and wind. But the bond between father and son in a single night had almost broken. At noon, Kyle called again. His voice was hoarse. Dad, everyone at Jessica's old firm is talking. Some say she is a liar, others call you a tyrant. She can't stand it. She is thinking of suing you. I sighed. If she wants to sue, let her do it, but let her remember what I have in my hands. A contract, a signature, and my honor. He remained silent and then said quietly, Dad, I really didn't know this would go so far. Everything is breaking. No, son, I said softly. Only what is fake breaks. What is true remains. That afternoon, a neighbor came by and brought me the printed newspaper. On the cover, there was a photo of me leaving the country club, with the headline, The Father Who Taught His Daughter-in-Law a Lesson in Gratitude. Below, the columnist commented, In today's society where titles are valued over character, perhaps we need more people like Frank Mason to remind us that knowledge is not wisdom and that money cannot buy respect. I folded the newspaper and smiled to myself, not out of pride, but because I remembered Helen. If she were alive, she would probably say, See? Sometimes you just need to keep quiet at the right moment for everyone to hear you. I took a sip of coffee, watching the sunlight enter through the window. The small house suddenly felt brighter. Not because the day was prettier, but because I knew that some shadows only dissipate when the light of truth is turned on. That afternoon, the city seemed to know my story. In every coffee shop I passed, people commented, That electrician did the right thing. Some even nodded. Sometimes the most expensive lesson is the price one has to pay for oneself. But among the support, there were also other voices. Some young people wrote on the internet, He went too far. He used money to humiliate others. I read it and just smiled. Every generation needs to touch a socket to understand how strong electricity is. At night, while tidying up the shop, Judge Maria Martinez called. Her voice was grave and serene. Frank, I witnessed everything that happened that day. The press can edit, but I don't forget. If Miss Jessica or anyone else tries to sue you, I will testify in your favor. I laughed softly. Thank you, ma'am. But I don't want to turn this into a legal battle. I just want my son to understand what college doesn't teach. Respect is never free. Still, she said, you should prepare. She is looking for a lawyer. Indeed, not long after, Richard Steinberg sent me a copy of a legal document. In it, Jessica's lawyer accused me of financial coercion and exploiting my family position to manipulate. I read every line carefully and then laughed. A law student graduating with honors and forgetting that her own signature is also proof, Richard. Yes, he replied with a tone between joking and annoyance. She is cutting her own power cord. That night, Kyle came again. He looked haggard with red eyes. Dad, Jessica is desperate. She says if the press doesn't stop, she won't be admitted to the bar. I sat in a chair and looked at my son. Son, I don't wish for her to fail. But sometimes failure is the beginning of conscience. I was silent for 3 years, believing that kindness would be returned. Now I know silence also has its price. He lowered his head and said quietly, Dad, I was wrong. I let others decide what class you belong to. I patted him on the shoulder, as soft as touching a thin wire. You were wrong, but a broken wire can be rejoined. The question is if you are willing to scrape off the burn to reconnect it. When Kyle left, I looked toward the shop door. Outside, it began to rain. Drops drumming on the tin roof, I sat in silence, listening to the sound of rain mixing with the metallic pounding in my heart. Helen used to say, The rain does not distinguish between roofs, but only those who know how to cover themselves do not get wet. I sighed. Maybe now the rain was cleaning what remained of falsehood. Tomorrow, if Jessica really wanted a confrontation, I would not be afraid, because justice is better late than never. 2 days later, on a foggy morning, a car stopped in front of my house. I looked out the window and saw Kyle get out first, and then Jessica. She wore a gray coat, hair tied up in a hurry, face pale and eyes red, as if she had cried all night. There was no trace of the proud bride from that day, only a young woman trembling with fear and shame. I opened the door. I said nothing. I just gestured for them to come in. They sat at the kitchen table, where Helen used to make breakfast. The air was thick. The ticking of the wall clock could be heard with every second. Jessica spoke first with a trembling voice. "Mr. Mason, I know I was wrong, but all this has gotten out of control. I have lost my job. The firm withdrew the contract. The press won't leave me alone. Please, stop." I looked at her. My eyes no longer showed anger, only tiredness. "I am not doing anything anymore, Jessica. It was your words that night that started this current. I just let it follow its natural course, action and consequence." She lowered her head. Tears fell. Kyle took her hand and said softly, "Dad, she knows she was wrong." "Me too, but please don't let this ruin everything." I turned to him with a grave voice. "Kyle, what ruined it wasn't the newspapers, but your silence when she called your father ignorant." Both looked down. I got up. I opened a closet and took out a thick folder of documents, put it on the table. Inside were all the papers, the loan contract, transfer statements, tuition bills, wedding invoices. Every page had a date, a time, a signature, a clear number. I kept this not to rub it in your face. I just wanted that one day when you were mature enough, you would look at it and understand that every opportunity has a price that someone else paid. Jessica tremblingly touched the first sheet. Her eyes scanned the amounts. $82,000 tuition a year, $15,000 for the prep course, $3,200 for a laptop, $4,000 for the wedding dress. She sobbed. I had no idea it was so much. "People usually have no idea," I replied, "because they are used to receiving without counting." She sobbed chokingly and then said quietly, "I'm so ashamed, Mr. Mason. I really believed I was better, that having more studies meant knowing more, but it turns out I was the most ignorant one in that room that day." I sat back down, speaking slowly. "I don't need an apology, Jessica. I just need you to remember that knowledge without gratitude is just an empty shadow. Helen used to say, if someone dares to bow their head to admit a mistake, do not step on them any more." I sighed, watching Jessica wipe her tears. "It's okay. I don't want to ruin anyone's future. You can renegotiate the debt payment with Richard, but go sign it yourself, and sign with honesty, not with pride." Jessica looked up with teary eyes. "Thank you, sir." I nodded slightly, my voice softer. "You're welcome. Pay with your actions." The kitchen went silent. Outside, the midday sun entered through the window, illuminating the white papers, as bright as an electric light. Helen, I thought. Maybe she was right. Sometimes forgiveness is also a way of teaching. The next morning I sat on the porch with a steaming cup of coffee in my hand. The early autumn air was crisp. The sky was calm. Only the whisper of oak leaves could be heard. This porch was where Kyle sat to do homework as a child, where I taught him to strip copper wires, to connect two ends of a circuit so the light would turn on without short-circuiting. Now the boy was sitting there again, bigger, more tired, and quieter than ever. He arrived early, still in yesterday's wrinkled shirt, eyes sunken from insomnia. I didn't speak. I let him break the silence. After a long while, he sighed. "Dad, Jessica can't sleep. She keeps repeating that she ruined everything. She is looking for a new job or anything. She says she wants to start over, that she wants your forgiveness." I took a sip of coffee, looking into the distance. Forgiveness is not a debt that can be broken, and that's it, son. It is a process. But at least she started with the 2 words you haven't said. Kyle lowered his head. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Dad. Not only did I stay silent, I was also ashamed of you. When I saw everyone looking at you differently, instinctively I lowered my head. I forgot that you have never lowered your head before anyone. I put down the coffee cup and looked directly at him. Kyle, you don't have to be ashamed for being wrong. You just need to have the courage not to do it again. Do you know why I did what I did? Not to humiliate anyone, but so you would understand that respect is a one-way current. The light only turns on when it flows in the right direction. He looked up with teary eyes. Dad, if I could go back in time, I would run. Stop, Jessica. Say I am proud of you. Time does not go back, I replied, but there is something stronger than time. Action. You can start over by how you live from now on. He nodded. A sparrow landed on the railing, sang a little, and flew away. I remembered Helen. If she were alive, she would be smiling, now seeing her son know how to bow his head without losing dignity. Kyle said slowly, Jessica says she wants to see you again, this time not to ask, but to thank. I remained silent. The wind blew through the trees, dragging some yellow leaves that fell on the steps. When she really understands that gratitude is not expressed with words, but with actions, then I will listen to her. We stood in silence. The morning sun cast over the wooden table, drawing the shadows of 2 men, one old, one young, both looking in the same direction. No one said anything else, but I knew that in that silence the thread that had broken that day was coming back together. There were no more sparks, just a soft light, enough to illuminate the faces of 2 people who were learning to love each other again. A week after that morning, I was working in the shop when I heard a car stop outside. It was Jessica. She got out, dressed in a white shirt and jeans, no makeup, her eyes still a little shy, but with something different, a calm and sincerity I hadn't seen before. I wiped my hands on a rag and waited. She approached, stopping for a moment at the threshold. Mr. Mason? Her voice was so low it was almost a whisper. I know you didn't want to see me, but I need to tell you this. I crossed my arms, leaning on the wooden door, and motioned for her to continue. I don't come to ask you to forgive the debt, or to justify myself. I come because today I was accepted at a small law firm on the west side. The pay is low, the work is hard, but it is a real job. I want to start over, on my own merits. I looked at her in silence. She continued. On my first day there, I met people I would never have paid attention to before. Plumbers, drivers, a single mother seeking help at the center to resolve a mortgage debt. I realized that all this time I talked about justice, without understanding that justice starts in the heart. I saw hands like yours, and I was ashamed of having despised them. Her voice trembled, tears fell, but without weakness. Mr. Mason, thank you for giving me the lesson that law school didn't teach me. I nodded slightly still without speaking. She slowly took an envelope out of her purse. This is the first payment, $2,100. I wanted to give it to you in person, not through the bank. Not to prove anything, but to say I accept my responsibility. I looked at the envelope in her hand. The bills weren't many, but I saw it clearly. This time they didn't buy presumption, but redeemed self-esteem. I didn't accept it immediately. Jessica, I don't need you to pay fast. I need you to pay correctly, according to your ability and the person you are learning to become. She nodded, smiling slightly through tears. I understand. Before leaving, she stopped and said quietly, Kyle says he still keeps Mrs. Helen's photo in the shop. She would be very proud of you. I sighed softly. If you really believe that, then don't waste this lesson. Let others see you change. That is the only way for Helen to be proud. Jessica bowed her head in farewell and headed to her car. I watched her walk away, her silhouette disappearing among the trees. On my desk, sunlight entered through the window and illuminated an old pair of pliers, reflecting a small but clear light. I touched it and smiled slightly, not for having won, but because I understood that the most powerful thing in the world is not electric current, but gratitude that has been ignited. The following days passed in silence. I returned to my routine in the shop: wires, switches, the smell of hot metal, the hum of drills. But something in me had changed. Every morning, opening the door, I no longer felt that heaviness. Maybe because finally the current had flowed back in the right direction, from pain to forgiveness. One afternoon, Kyle came with a paper bag. "Dad, Jessica asked me to give you this." I opened it and saw inside a photo printed in large format. It was a wedding photo, but not the one from the country club. This one was taken in a small church, with natural light, simple, and in the bottom corner, a handwritten note. "Thank you for giving us the chance to learn to be people again." Below were both signatures. I looked at it for a long time. There were no longer luxurious wedding dresses or ostentatious smiles. Only two real faces, simple, a little trembling but warm. I nodded slightly. This time they do know how to look directly at the camera. I said, half jokingly, half seriously. Kyle sat down, his voice grave. "Dad, I want to thank you, not just for the money or for forgiving Jessica, but for teaching me what it is to be a real man. Before I thought a strong man was someone successful, with degrees, with money. But you taught me that being strong is choosing the right thing, even if you have to be alone." I remained silent, pouring more coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen like in the old times with Helen. "Kyle, you know one thing?" I said, my voice grave but warm. "I don't need anyone to tell me if I am right or not. I just need to know that you have understood. That is enough." He smiled with slightly red eyes. "I understand, Dad. I won't let my son grow up without knowing who his grandfather is." I looked toward the porch where the afternoon sun filtered through the old oak. That sentence moved me. Maybe wounds only truly heal when one thinks of the next generation. Before leaving, Kyle stopped at the door and turned. "Oh, and one more thing. She said that this month she will continue sending the payment on time, but not out of fear of debt, but because she wants to keep her promise." I smiled. "Good. Once people learn to keep their word, they also learn to live with decency." After he left, I stayed on the porch. The wind brought a slight smell of burnt wood from the nearby workshops. I watched the sky darken and told myself, "Helen, do you see?" The tree we planted was whipped by the wind, but it didn't break. Now new leaves are coming out. And for the first time in many months, I allowed myself to smile for real. Not for having won, not for revenge, but because I felt that the past had finally reconciled with the present. 6 months passed since that night at the country club. Spring had arrived. The oak in front of the house had new shoots, as green as if it had never known a storm. I kept working regularly in the shop, getting some important contracts. The laughter of the young apprentices made the space feel less empty, and sometimes during the break they mentioned the story of the electrician who taught his daughter-in-law a lesson as an anecdote. I just smiled, neither denying nor boasting. Life is long enough for whoever wants to understand. One afternoon, while tidying my desk, Kyle called. His voice was soft, but radiant. "Dad, Jessica is about to give birth." I remained silent for a few seconds, and then started laughing. "Are you going to be a father already?" "Yes. She wanted you to know before anyone else. She said that, if it is a girl, her name will be Helen." I squeezed the phone, unable to say a word. Outside, the wind blew through the trees. The scent of lavender from the backyard entered softly. A new cycle of life was about to begin, as smooth as a closed circuit. "Kyle, when you hold that baby, you will understand why I did all this. When you love a child, you know that parents don't need to be thanked immediately, just that their children don't forget them." He was silent for a moment, his voice broken. "Dad, I won't let my daughter forget her roots. I promise." A few weeks later, I went to the hospital. Jessica was in bed, her face tired but radiant. In her arms she held a tiny baby, wrapped in a white blanket. When she saw me, she nodded slightly. "Mr. Mason, thank you for coming. I don't know how to thank you enough, but I hope little Helen grows up loving her grandfather's hands." I sat down and gently touched the baby's little hand. Her skin was soft, warm, and so fragile it made my heart tremble. I saw Helen's image in each of her features: the slightly curved eyes, the fair skin, the soft and weak breathing like a new promise. "Hello, little one," I said very quietly. "Welcome to this world. I hope you grow up appreciating the simplest things: a hug, a pair of hands, and gratitude." Jessica broke down crying, and Kyle, by her side, put a hand on my shoulder. "Dad, everything will be different from now on, I promise." I nodded. Tears fell without me trying to hide them. In that moment, I saw Helen, not in a photo, but as if she were there, smiling, with her tender look. Leaving the hospital, the sunset covered the road. I stopped the car to the side and watched the sun sink behind the distant buildings. There are lessons that do not need to be repeated, only continued, I thought. And in my heart, I knew that the light at the end of the day was not that of the sun, but that of forgiveness. That summer, my life remained the same. I opened the shop in the morning, closed it in the afternoon, and on weekends visited little Helen. The baby grew faster than I imagined. Her pink skin, her eyes open with a curiosity that seemed to question the whole world. Every time I held her in my arms, I felt my heart lighten. The cold and darkness I had felt for so many months seemed to dissolve with the warm breath of the baby. One afternoon, Kyle arrived at the shop, with his shirt stained with paint and a bill in his hand. "Dad, this is this month's payment. Jessica said that even if things are difficult, she wants to keep paying for herself. She is working overtime at the Community Legal Assistance Center, and I am doing consulting for some small constructions." "We are." "Good, Dad." I smiled. "I'm glad you're well. Don't rush to pay. This debt is not paid with money, but by living correctly." He nodded, looking around the shop. "Can I help with anything?" "Yes, you can," I said, handing him a pair of pliers. "Help me check this old wiring, to see if there is any broken circuit." We worked together, without talking much. The creaking of copper wires, the sound of a nail falling, the wind sneaking through the window. I looked at Kyle's hand holding the screwdriver, a small scratch on the thumb, the wound of work, something he had forgotten. I laughed. "Do you know how to use the pliers yet?" He smiled and replied, "Relax, Dad. I still remember. It turns out connecting wires is like connecting people. You have to scrape off the burnt part before you can solder again." I patted him on the shoulder, my gaze warmer than the midday sun. "Exactly. But remember, don't let the current always flow in one direction. Forgiveness also needs to return, so everything lights up equally." That afternoon just stopped by with the baby. She stopped at the door, her face tired but serene. "Mr. Mason, Helen sleeps very well. The nurse says she smiles in her dreams." I looked at my granddaughter, and then at Jessica. She lowered her head and said quietly, "I know I will have to pay this debt for a long time, but it doesn't matter. Because this time, every dollar is proof that I am no longer afraid to look you in the eye." I smiled kindly. "Don't look at me as a creditor. Look at me as someone who once believed you could be better." She hugged the baby tighter, tears rolling down her cheeks. I said nothing else. I just gently put my hand on the girl's head. She started and then grabbed my finger with her whole little hand. In that moment, I felt as if a switch had been turned on somewhere in my heart. A small warm light spread throughout the shop. Helen used to say, "Electricity only makes sense when it is transmitted, and love only makes sense when it is forgiven." I saw mother and daughter walk away. The sunset fell. The smell of welding mixed with the wind. In my mind, I thought, maybe all the currents in the world finally lead to the same place, the heart of one who knows how to love and be grateful. A year passed. Life returned to its rhythm, but my heart was different. The electrical shop worked better than ever. Orders increased, and the young employees called me Don Frank, half jokingly, half with respect. Every time they asked about last year's story, I just smiled. There are wires that, when broken, are even stronger after joining them. Every night I sat on the porch, looking at the oak in front of the house. Under that tree, Kyle had played on the swing. Jessica had come to ask for forgiveness, and now little Helen was learning to walk. Every time she took her first steps, her laughter lit up the whole space. I often picked her up in my arms, and she laughed out loud, her small hands reaching for my face. Every time that happened, I heard my wife's voice echo. See? The light is still here. It just found another way to return. One afternoon, Kyle came and left an envelope on the table. This is the last payment of the debt, Dad. I looked at him and smiled slightly. Keep it. That money is now for your daughter. I no longer need it. But, Dad, what I needed you already paid me. With the way you live, with the look you had the day you held your daughter, and understood that love is also responsibility. Kyle was speechless. I poured more coffee. The aroma spread like in the old days with Helen. You know one thing, I said, my voice grave but warm. When you were little, I taught you that electricity only flows when the two poles are connected correctly. People are the same. On one side is love, and on the other, gratitude. If one of the two is missing, the current goes out. He nodded with bright eyes. We sat watching little Helen play in the yard, holding a piece of copper wire, laughing. Jessica was at the door with a calm look, no trace of the pride of the previous year. Dad, she said quietly, if it weren't for you, we would never have understood what a family is. I smiled. Family is not a place without mistakes. It is the place where we learn to forgive and repair broken circuits. The sunset fell, the light touched the electric cables hanging on the wall, shining like memories. I looked at my hands, calloused, tanned by the sun, but as firm as always. Helen, I thought in silence, the lesson you entrusted to me has been taught. I took my granddaughter in my arms. She stretched her hands to grab the collar of my shirt, smiling radiantly. I said quietly, as if speaking to myself, Grandpa doesn't give second chances. He only gives chances that have been earned. And you, little one, remember, the light is only truly beautiful when it is turned on from the heart. The sky darkened. I turned on the porch light, a yellow light covering the old roof. The small house lit up in the night, warm and quiet. A cycle had closed. Not with a thunder, but with the light of forgiveness and gratitude. If this story has captivated you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left of the screen. Thanks for watching.